Good afternoon, and thank you for joining Conversations for College Success. This is going to be a fun conversation because myself and my very important audio person, Miss Imari Hill, is going to be on the podcast with me, talking about a podcast conference we just returned from. This is our second podcast conference. The first one was last year, Afros and Audios, and the one this year is an Evolutions podcast conference that also talked about sound. So we had a chance to learn a few different things at this event. The first thing that I learned is I need to spend more time trying to interact with you, my audience, which I think is going to be a fun thing because I'm going to have a challenge for you at the end of this podcast. From that perspective, the other thing is this would also be considered another networking conversation for college success. Why do I say that? Meeting people, interacting with them is really going to be important for your success. And part of that comes from, hopefully you listened to last week's podcast where I talked about reconnecting with a student, Eric Barnett. That was a phenomenal opportunity. The other thing that happened is both myself and Miss Imari had a chance to connect with Quincy Lewis. How great. We had met him at Afros and Audios and happened to see him at this podcast as well. So again, the importance of connecting with people is huge. You don't know where you're going to see them again. You don't know where you're going to have an opportunity to learn from them. We had a chance to have drinks, which was great. And those are the kinds of things that you can do moving forward. Having said that, I'm going to ask Miss Imari if she has any comments as it relates to either interacting with my audience or potentially networking, because that's exactly most of what we did while we were at that conference.
Interacting with your audience is so important because it allows you to get to know who you're speaking to. I know people love to listen to the podcast every week, but it was great to be able to hear other people speak about what they've learned from what you've discussed, as well as me on a few podcasts and more guests. Just having that interaction is so important because it allows us to expand the podcast and talk about more topics. In regards to networking, it was so much fun being able to speak with Quincy after seeing him at the Afros and Audio podcast. It was also great to meet Eric Barnett. He was a wonderful person to talk with and get to know. I was able to speak with a myriad of people that I never met before and speak with audio professionals. As an audio nerd, I love speaking about different equipment and get a lot of insight about things that I never thought of before. So it was a win-win.
And thank you so much for that, because that's exactly what we want people to learn. You need to branch out. You need to meet with other people. You need to essentially put yourself out there to expand your network. And then a lot of the people that you meet, you then need to connect with on LinkedIn so you can stay in touch. You can know what they're doing. You can know activities or events that they're holding or going to be participating in, and you can reconnect with them there as well. All of those things make a huge difference as it relates to your success. The other reason that that becomes important is should something happen where you have lost your job, and unfortunately, a number of people have, not only in the government, but quite frankly, throughout not only the United States, but probably other countries with all the things that are going on, those contacts and connections can make a huge difference in helping you in potentially recreating your resume or adjusting it, or giving you people that you can talk with. Because as things like that happen, you want to get advice on what are some suggestions that people would have. Maybe you were in one industry, but that industry is shrinking. What else or how else can you use your talents and skills to help you to be successful in another industry? People that you are already connected to are people who are more than happy to help you to be successful. And I say that it's important because I have seen occasionally on LinkedIn where people will say, I've lost my job, can you help me? And although it's nice to say that you are looking for employment, to me, it's more effective to have a one-on-one conversation with someone or to send them a note through LinkedIn to say, I've lost my job. I'd like to have a conversation with you to see if there's any suggestions or things that I should do that might make me a better candidate. So all of those things can make a difference as it relates to your success. The other piece with meeting new people is you can find out other opportunities that are out there. Maybe they have a position that you hadn't heard of or that you didn't think would work for you. The only way you're going to find out is to have those conversations. Now, the one thing that I also thought was great, which Amari alluded to and mentioned, a lot of people were happy to have a conversation with you. Those are the things that you want. Oftentimes, you go to a conference and you're not sure if someone's going to talk to you or feel comfortable. Depending on where you're sitting, depending on what's going on, people reach out and ask you questions or to try to find out what you're doing. So people were surprised to some extent that I had a podcast, Conversations for College Success, but I gave 100% of the credit to everything else is done by my phenomenal Amari Hill. I'm not technologically astute, but I acknowledge that. I'm aware of that. So knowing the things that you're good at and also knowing the things that you're not that good at are also important for you to be successful. I don't know, Amari, if there's anything you'd like to add to those comments that I just shared or not.
Thank you so much for the acknowledgement. I appreciate it. And I love working on this podcast, by the way. I think it's good to acknowledge the things that you don't know. It's so important because you don't want to come across like you know something. And then when, for example, if you do conversate with them and you do get a job, you don't want to be on the job and not know what you're doing because you bluffed and appeared like you knew something that you didn't. So you do want to be honest and transparent about the things that you do know. That's so important. Matter of fact, the other day, my boss told me the exact same thing. She's been in the industry for about 30 plus years. And she told me, you always want to acknowledge when you don't know something because it's better to just get that information that you don't know at the time if you're with an expert who does know that information. And not only that, you can just look it up afterwards to get clarification or an understanding yourself. So when someone does ask you that information, you'll know. So I think that's super important to be okay with not knowing and then being okay with also knowing. And you want to be confident in what you know because you don't want to push people away. Be confident in what you know, but also be honest about what you don't know.
Absolutely. Honesty is really, really critical because if you bluff and essentially someone calls your bluff because they don't know that you're bluffing, that causes a huge set of disappointment as well as distrust. Those are things you don't need when you're trying to build relationships and be successful in any environment that you find yourself in. I also want to give a shout out to Sasha Willis. She had some of us get together so we could figure out what people were doing and how they were doing. She originally had her own podcast, and now I think she's on the producer side and production side of it, which I think is phenomenal. So again, you have an opportunity when you go to events to meet a variety of people, some in your field, some not in your field. The bottom line is you're meeting folks and you're building new relationships. Now, what's also important, you're not building the relationship so you can use the person. Please be aware of that. You're building the relationship so that you know more people in potentially a variety of industries. Again, you never know when knowing someone in an industry that's different than yours can help you to be successful, whether it's in your industry or in something that someone wanted you to research or look into. So the more people that you know and you stay in touch with, the better off you are. Having said that, though, one of the things that I have found LinkedIn to be very helpful with is keeping in touch with people. And that is as they post things, you can comment or you can, say that you want to celebrate it or a thumbs up or whatever. Again, it's a way for people to know that you are paying attention to what they're doing. The other way you can use LinkedIn, though, is if you see what's going on in someone's industry and maybe you have questions and want more information, or you just want to say, congratulations, I think this is great, or congratulations for a promotion. Again, a way to do that through LinkedIn. However, LinkedIn cannot be your only way to stay in contact with people. And having said that, for those people who are in a variety of countries, there are oftentimes conferences and events that you can attend throughout different countries in the world. We heard about there's a podcast conference in London. Although we're not going to do it this year, at some point we're going to look into that because I think A, it would be great to visit London, and B, to find out what other podcasters are doing internationally. So again, ways to connect with people and to try to stay connected with them once you have met them and received their contact information. And then the last point I want to make, and then I'll see if Imari would like to make any additional points, is that people don't always understand why I like to attend events. Attending different events, I don't attend one every week, but attending different events throughout the year allows you to stay connected to or reconnect with people that you have met. So I try to go to things where I know that a variety of people are going to be at so that I can catch up with them, see how they're doing, see if there's any new things going on. And it just makes for such a great way to stay connected. Yes, whether it's by phone or through LinkedIn, but oftentimes that face-to-face makes a huge difference because it helps to cement those relationships. Now, before I offer you a challenge, I'll see if Miss Imari has anything else she'd like to share.
It's important to go to conferences because you'll be able to speak with people, interact with people, and learn so much. Both of the conferences that we went to, both Afros and Audios, and this Evolutions Podcast Movement Conference, has taught me so many things in regards to audio, finding out what people want to do with their podcast, and things outside of that. Going to conferences, being bold in who you are, speaking with people, and being open to learning is crucial.
Thank you so much for those final comments. It's absolutely correct. And part of the reasons that we keep going to the conferences is so we can continue to grow our network. The other thing I will say is I'm going to say a good number of my podcasts talk about networking, informational interviewing, which is a form of networking, ways for you to continue to increase your network. The more people in your network, the more opportunities there are not only to learn, but also to see what else is going on. Now, I have a challenge for my subscribers, and even if you're just a listener, I have a challenge for you as well, and that is to attend between 2 to 3 networking events or to contact 2 to 3 people that you do not know and build a relationship with. And what I'd like you to do is then share your information that you've completed it, or if there are some concerns or issues that came up, what those are, in the comment section as a subscriber or even as a listener. That way I can respond or I can share with the next podcast what worked, what didn't work, or how many of you accepted the challenge and how it worked out, because I would love to do that. And then the last thing I will say is thank you for listening to my subscribers and also to new listeners, and look forward to chatting with you next week. Bye-bye.